I feel very called to become a member of the Catholic Church.
Love the Catholic Church. It's just the best place to be.
From the studios of EWTN, this is Open Line. In North America, call toll-free 1-800-585-9396. That's 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. You can also send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
Hey, tremendous Friday to each and every one of you. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to join us on Open Line Friday. EWTN's Vice President of Theology, Colin Donovan, is in the house to answer your theology questions. Colin will talk about theology, church teaching, scripture, and the like. The phone number to ask Colin a question is 1-800-585-9396. That's toll-free anywhere in North America. 1-800-585-9396. If you're outside the United States and Canada, your number is 1-205-271-2985, and we will put you straight to the front of the line at 1-205-271-2985. Or you can send us an email, openline@ewtn.com. I'm Jack Williams. Elena Rodriguez produces the program, and your call screener is Mr. Matt Gabinski. Our host, as he is every Friday, as I said, EWTN's Vice President of Theology, Mr. Colin Donovan. And joining us here for at least the first portion of the show, we're overly vice-presidented in the studio today. Vice President and Chief Counsel for EWTN, Mr. John Manos, has joined us. As many of you are aware, the ruling came down from, give me the court, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, denying EWTN's appeal in the HHS mandate case. And here to shed a little light on what that means for the network and to give us a little layman's, hopefully, understanding of just what all that means is our Chief Counsel, Mr. John Manos, Esquire. Mr. Manos?
Thank you.
Go.
Well, and you said to do it in layman's terms. I guess the quickest way to describe it to everybody, just to bring it to everybody's attention again, the government has mandated that even EWTN's health insurance, doesn't matter, unless you're a church, you have to carry we call it the contraception mandate, but let's be clear about it. It also includes abortifacients, voluntary sterilizations, and things that are immediately harmful that aren't. EWTN has said the whole time these are not health care. The government is telling us we have to carry these things in our health care insurance, and if we don't provide these things, they will fine us millions and millions of tens of millions of dollars a year. That's what's at stake. So we either have to give people abortion-inducing drugs and allow them to get voluntarily mutilate their reproductive systems, or we have to pay tens of millions of dollars because the government says they're not going to be able to get this anywhere else. That's what's at stake. EWTN is now in the point where the district court said, the district court said the same thing, where they felt that it wasn't an imposition on us. And because we put this form in, it's really not coming from you. The Court of Appeals, the oral argument was held a year ago. We just now, almost after a year, finally got the opinion. It's a 2-1 opinion. There's 3 judges on the panel. 2 of them, the majority was written by Judge Jill Pryor. The dissent, which says that, no, really should be different for EWTN, was the 1 vote, and that came from the Judge Joe Flatt. The one in the middle was Judge Anderson. Judge Anderson wrote a concur in the middle. 100 pages of the opinion, nearly 100 pages of a 148-page opinion, come from Judge Jill Pryor and her reasoning why, in her opinion, and the court's opinion, they believe that this does not put a substantial burden on EWTN, and they believe that this is the least restrictive means the government could have to do this. Now, what they're saying by that is there's no other way the government could do this without harming EWTN. They couldn't, if I'm to believe what the court says, they couldn't do what the IRS does, which is put the forms in the post office. That wouldn't hurt anybody else. They couldn't open their own clinics like they have already, where people could walk in and get these things. They couldn't tell people, any doctor, if somebody comes to you and wants these things that the government believes is so important. That's the beginning of this. The government says it has a compelling interest to kill embryos and to mutilate people's reproductive systems. That's what they're saying with this. Because they say that, the government says we have a compelling interest to force EWTN to do this. The courts are supposed to come back under RFRA and religious freedom. EWTN says, wait a minute, we sincerely believe this is wrong, period. We don't want to comply with this. We're supposed to be exempt under our own Constitution. That's all it takes. But instead, the courts are saying, that's really not so bad. They don't have another way to do it. You have to go along with this, and really, it's not so bad after all. So the court's substituting, and this is where Judge Joe Flatt does a good job of explaining that they're really overlooking the weight of our objection to this. They're kind of skirting past it because they don't think it's that bad of a deal. What they've done is the court has made its own opinion and substitute for our own moral judgments by saying it's not that bad and there's not another way to do it. That's not fair. That's not where the Constitution was set up. That's not where any of this was. And the dissent in this case says he thinks one of the reasons they want to do it is because people will abuse religious exercise. In other words, the majority, this is the other judge, judging what his other two judges, the reasons they've said no to us, is because they're afraid we're abusing religious freedom. Seriously. Think about that for a minute.
You don't see that in the Bill of Rights, do you?
No,
exactly. Government shall make no provisions regarding the free exercise of religion. How would that be their responsibility now to make sure we don't have too free an exercise of religion?
Well, there is some, as Judge Joe Flatt says in his dissent, it is the judge can properly from the bench separate the sheep claims from the goat claims. They can figure out when they're being gamed. And they should. I mean, that is a role of a judge. But for anybody in the right mind in the modern world to be confused as to the church's stance on abortion, or to think that Catholics, any Catholic institution, just think of EWTN. People don't even have to know who EWTN is. Do they think that in any shred of the way EWTN would support abortion-inducing drugs? Nobody in their right mind would think that EWTN would be okay supporting that. That's really where this comes down to.
John, can you stay with us for another segment?
Sure.
Just getting started on an open line Friday with EWTN's Vice President of Theology, Colin Donovan, and our bonus Vice President and Chief Counsel, Mr. John Manos, talking about the recent Circuit Court decision regarding the EWTN HHS mandate case before them. Open line Friday rolls on.
From the archives, this is the wisdom of Mother Angelica.
Sin divorces us from God. Until we pay, we have to pay. Some people pay for everlasting punishment because they will not ask forgiveness. And some people pay in purgatory because they never use this life to cleanse their souls. I look upon every difficulty. I try. I don't think I always make it. But I try to make every difficulty an opportunity. Some difficulties make you humble. Some make you forgive, which makes it pleasing to God. Our dear Lord himself said on the cross, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do. Have you ever said that to your neighbor when you forgave them?
For more about Mother Angelica, visit EWTNRC.com.
Podcasts of Open Line are available within 24 hours of live broadcast. Go to EWTN.com and click on Multimedia.
This is Father Joseph Mary.
This is Dr. Ray Guarendi, host of The Doctor Is In.
This is Father Leonard Mary of the Franciscan Missionaries of the Eternal Word. Have a blessed Lent from all of us at the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
On Saturday morning, EWTN television will broadcast the Mass of Christian Burial for U.S. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia from the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. Be sure to tune in Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern on EWTN television. Welcome to Open Line Friday. If you've got a question for Colin Donovan or even a question for our General Counsel, John Manos, regarding the HHS mandate, our number's 1-800-585-9396. That's toll-free anywhere in North America. Colin?
Yeah, I wanted to ask John this question. If you get to sort of the nub of what the government asks us to do, it's to fill in this Form 700 in which we pose an objection and we claim this accommodation. Not the exception that a church would get, but an accommodation that the government in its generosity is giving to some institutions, as I understand it. And we're saying that even the use of this form is an objection. I noticed in skimming over that decision yesterday that the court seemed to be saying that, well, you know, in the end, it's not you that are triggering the contraceptives, the sterilization, and so on, the coverage of that, but it's the law which says you must give this, and so you only have a minimal instrumental means, and that gets to the whole de minimis burden, the little burden that is being put on institutions to fill in this card and in that way cooperate. What is the way that we hope to be able to address that to show that that's a false claim on the court's part?
You have to start, the devil's in the details when it comes to this law. We have to start right back where we started. Is it fair to say the things that they want us to provide are health care? The church says no. We have to start there. And if we tell the government, no, we're not going to go along with you and call this health care and do that in your name. They want us to send a form in, and then the government, and we're supposed to tell them who administers our health insurance, which EWTN is self-funded. That means claims are paid by EWTN. We don't have a distant insurance company. This literally comes out of our pocket. This would be like asking any other Catholic to pay for somebody else's sterilization or contraception. And if we tell them we can't do that, they want us to send this Form 700 in. And then the government, through some sort of magic, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I've heard the oral arguments out of so many of these. They claim that it's going to be cost neutral and free. And it really won't cost us any money, and they will inform our insurance provider that they can provide it through the government funds. Now, when asked where that money comes from, they say it comes from, now remember, the government says this is a compelling interest and they have to do it. But they're unwilling to give the money for it. The money's coming out of this extra tax that they're putting on self-funded TPAs. So they're just churning. It's money laundering, is the way it looks to me as a layperson. I call accounting sorcery. But if somebody's telling me, oh, no, it's free and it's cost neutral, and we're talking about, well, no, we're getting the money out of the fees. Well, in my mind, I'm hearing, so you're taxing us to do this anyway. You're just calling it something different. The whole thing looks like that. It's this wash. The nice thing in the dissent that points it out is everything that causes, it all boils down to one thing. The government says they can't give the contraceptions to anybody until they get a form from us. So we're causing these people to get the stuff. That's the first objection. But here's another way I like to describe it. Remember, we're not in a high legal discussion here. And I know if I got into a fight over some aspects of this metaphor with some of my legal scholar friends, we could talk all day about it. But I like to tell people, because it makes more sense to this way. It's as if the government said, we want to put a vending machine in your lobby that dispenses abortifacients and bring a van in that does sterilizations once a week. And we want you to put a sign up that says this stuff's free for everybody. And we said, we don't want that there. And then they said, well, we'll put our name on it. The thing's still sitting in our lobby on our property doing the things. That's the problem. Nobody would want that. If the government said, you have to do this, everybody would say, get that off my property. Well, the government's saying, no, we'll put our name on it, though. It's still there. It's still an imposition. It's still in the way. It's still doing things in your space. Like I said earlier, if the government thinks it's so important to do this, do it on their turf. Don't do it in
Right,
our yard.
right.
Don't do it with our stuff. Don't make us administer it for you.
Whereas our free exercise and all of that, we're basically imposing a government view of morality. I'm not obliged to the legal theory and practice and language and all that, but I look at it this way, and I've used this explanation in trying to help people conceive how they might defend against this case. And that is, you know, when the government is providing this to others and there are people who are members of your policy who use it, each of those members, each of the person on the policy is making their own moral judgment and therefore accruing their own moral culpability for the decision to participate in a plan which gives them contraception. The innocent person who never uses that feature, if they're a layman and their company provides it, they never use that feature, you know, they're morally scot-free. The person who uses it bears the culpability. In this case, the Catholic or Mormon or Orthodox Jew or whoever it may be that is running a company or running an insurance company that is obliged to, they are incurring a culpability of some degree. It's moral cooperation and it's material. It's not formal if they disagree with it, but they're incurring some material cooperation with every single person in their plan, whether it's, you know, somebody who works for Blue Cross Blue Shield or whether it's EWTN with its self-funded program. You know, so basically this imposes a certain moral, a universal view of the moral universe on a great many people, and not just on EWTN. And for me, that's an affront to every American citizen.
That's right.
That a board member of a corporation or any institution, nonprofit or otherwise, should be asked to suborn their conscience to the conscience of the Health and Human Services Department.
And that's that's right at the nub of the whole problem with this, just to wake everybody back up to what's going on with this. If it's so important to the government, like you said, why are they making everybody in the country do it? If it was so important to them, they would do it themselves. Right. But it's important to the government to make us do it. Why? Why? They want to teach us something different than we believe.
And next it will be transsexual surgeries, and then it will be euthanasia.
That's right. God save us. Hopefully not. Hopefully stop it here.
This is where the legal theory that they're using will ultimately lead.
That's right.
To the phones we go. Rick is in St. Charles, Missouri, listening to EWTN on Covenant Network. Rick, what's your question today for John Manos and Colin Donovan?
Hi. Our wonderful, corrupt, humanist government, with the death of Scalia, really has you guys in a vice right now. Assuming you guys lose, what other options do you have other than refusing the pinch of incense, falling on your sword, and going out of business?
I don't know that that's the only option. And you're asking a question, really. One of the temptations, and I saw some commentary, it's a sad state of affairs if we hinge all of our belief in the future on the existence of a single man. While it's true that we could take a lot of consolation in relying on Justice Scalia, God knows what he's doing, and God knew the state of his life and where things were. We have to trust that God won't abandon his people. That doesn't always mean that we don't live in the best of conditions. It doesn't always mean that we aren't tried by the conditions of our society. But I refuse to believe that our Blessed Mother and Jesus aren't still active and can't make things happen to make this situation look different tomorrow. With your question, I think the other thing you're getting right at the heart at, which is the real legal question, is how is this going to work out practically in the courts? I don't really know. There's everybody that have, this is where legal scholars and pundits sit down with their crystal ball and try to tell us what the future is going to be. But the reality is this is why we have to be praying for the situation. We need miracles. We need the intercession of Our Lady, and we need acts of providence to change the situation the way it is today. And that can happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was very, in all the hustle and bustle over the Pope's plane interview, people are forgetting the absolutely wonderful and solid addresses he gave when he was in Mexico. And I loved especially that he tied the future of our hemisphere to Our Lady of Guadalupe and a revival of sanctity, essentially a new Pentecost along the lines of that first Pentecost that brought 10 million Indians into the faith in 7 years period. So I think we look to Our Lady of Guadalupe. She is the protectress of life. She's the protectress of our continent from the Arctic to the Antarctic. And I think we look to her and we count on her and we trust in her promise, and that I think we will see at some point a flowering that is akin to that first flowering in the Americas of the faith.
Sure.
Next stop for us is Denver, Colorado. Kathy is listening to EWTN Radio on Denver Catholic Radio. Kathy, what's your question today?
Hello, you guys.
Hello, Kathy.
Hey, Kathy.
Boy, you just hit a raw nerve with me. My question is where is the score? I have a couple comments, but where's the scorecard as far as Catholic hospitals, Hobby Lobby, people that have been exempted from portions of this law, and of course the Little Sisters of the Poor? Could that decision not set a precedent for other organizations? Do you guys know where, especially with the hospitals, because I could see an option being we just close the Catholic hospitals, which provides health care to millions of people in this country.
Well, you're hitting some real history there. I think it was Cardinal O'Connor that threatened the very same thing when they told him the last time. I don't know that there's such a resolve nationwide to be able to make such a universal statement, but what you're saying is true. I'd like to change your question a little bit, if it's okay.
Okay.
One aspect of it that's true, if it was so important to the government that they have to do it with our hands, they have to force us to use our hands to do their work, why do they exempt some places and not others?
Well, it came out today, Pepsi and ExxonMobil.
They're exempt?
Why are they getting an exemption and the Little Sisters of the Poor are not getting one?
If I just use my regular lights, I'm not even my lawyer lights, if I just look at that as a regular person, are they telling me that Pepsi's profits are the new religion, that's the God, as opposed to the one that we follow?
Well, and they granted unions, they granted a lot of those who have relationships with the administration. And I think there is a level of moral corruption at work here, in that we're really seeing, I think, and this is something to think of in view of the elections in any country, and that is your savior, big government, and the programs of big government, and the providence of big government, or is your trust in God and your Savior is Christ and your providence is that of the Father? I think these are the decisions that we face.
Yes. In many ways, yes.
I was just going to say one other thing. Pope Francis has been vocal about the closing the borders, which I don't happen to agree with his position on that. But why isn't he coming out and saying, you absolutely have to stop doing this. You're persecuting Christians in our country. I wish he would hit some more hot button issues that I think, especially when you're dealing with the sanctity of human life. Since everybody likes him, this would be the thing I wish he would speak out on.
Yeah. Well, he did when he met with President Obama and he spoke about religious liberty and he turned from the podium and looked at the president. That, in the diplomacy of the Vatican, that was a strong rebuke. So, according to the style of Vatican politics, the politics of the Holy See, which is the oldest diplomatic institution in the world, they have done that, and I'm sure it's going on behind the scenes as well in private meetings.
It's a shame that our news doesn't magnify that to the extent they do comments about candidates.
Exactly.
Thanks, Kathy.
Guys.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate the phone call. God bless you. If you've got a question for Colin Donovan or John Manos, can you hang out for a little bit longer?
Sure.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. 1-800-585-9396. If you're outside the United States and Canada, we'd love to hear from you as well. Your number is 1-205-271-2985. That's 1-205-271-2985. 2985, and we will put you straight to the front of the line, or you can send us an email, openline@ewtn.com. Open Line Friday, our Vice President of Theology is in the house, Mr. Colin Donovan, And we're also joined by John Manos, our Vice President and General Counsel here at EWTN. We're talking about the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling against EWTN on our claim that the HHS mandate hurts our deeply held religious beliefs. Plenty of time for your phone calls, 1-800-585-9396.
Check out EWTN's official YouTube channel.
Just follow the link on our homepage at EWTN.com or go to YouTube.com/EWTN.
Watch EWTN's live shows or today's homily from the Daily Mass.
Click the upload button to see our most recent clips.
You can also find all of EWTN YouTube content by clicking the playlist button.
It's all on the official EWTN YouTube channel at YouTube.com/EWTN.
Visit today.
60 Seconds with Father Mitch Pacwa.
You can only say that you're saved in Christ and that you act in cooperation with Him. That's the only way you can do it. And God's plan has ordained that the efficacy of the exercise of the ministry is also conditioned by a greater or lesser human receptivity and participation. Now let me go through that. The way that God set things up is that how efficacious, how well the sacraments work, if you will, and how well we cooperate with them depends on how much more we receive or how much less we receive. Are we receptive or are we closed-minded? I can pour a bucket of water over your head, but if your mouth isn't open, you're not going to get a drink. Same thing here. If your mind and heart are not open to Jesus, I can pour infinite amounts of grace all over you, but you're not going to receive a saving grace. That's what's key here.
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
I see God as a trusting father, a father who really cares for me, is guiding me in His providence, one who really has me wrapped in His love so that I don't need to worry about anything as I go through my day-to-day life.
Without God, I'm nothing. Take Two with Jerry and Debbie is a fresh look on life through the eyes of faith, love, and mercy.
Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Weekdays, noon and midnight Eastern on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Thank you for listening to EWTN Radio.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@EWTN.com.
Coming up next on many of these EWTN-affiliated stations, Cresta in the afternoon. What would the founders do? What did they really believe about church-state issues, and how do they apply today? Dr. Vincent Philip Munoz will answer these questions by providing comprehensive interpretations of James Madison, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson, the founders of this great nation. What a concept. We're talking about the HHS mandate and the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling against EWTN in that affair. We've got Vice President of Theology Colin Donovan in the house, as well as our Vice President and General Counsel, Mr. John Manos. Back to the phones we go. Lynn is listening in the great state of Florida. Lynn, what's your question today?
Well, my question is, if EWTN is self-paying, and if I should become an employee of EWTN, and if I want to buy a birth control pill or a abortifacient, or if I want to have a hysterectomy, and EWTN gets the bill, will I be fired because it's so abhorrent to the teachings of the Catholic Church that I can no longer work at EWTN? And the only reason EWTN would have found out about it is because they are, like you said, they're carrying their own insurance and therefore paying the doctor's bills and the prescription.
That's an awesome question.
It is a good question because the beginning of it is, let's say you became an employee, you would be told that we have health insurance and you have an option to take our health insurance or get it somewhere else. That would be your first choice. And let's say you wanted to take EWTN's, then you are able to review something called a summary plan document. And the summary plan document describes things that EWTN will cover. One of the things you brought up is a hysterectomy. Now, those come in a variety of types. We've always excluded something called voluntary sterilization. That's where there's no medical need for such a thing to happen.
Right. Yeah.
And abortifacients are excluded from our health care plan. So your question presumes, first of all, that you didn't read the summary plan, and that two, that even though the summary plan document excludes those things, that you still tried to get us to pay for it. If there was really at that point, either the doctor would have said that's not covered in your plan or something. I don't know that would ever get to a point where EWTN's firing somebody, because we've already said up front what we cover and don't cover.
Right.
So
and some of those things are in the so-called mandate, which presumably appropriate HHS regime would be taking care of it outside of that. We just don't want to be inside of it.
Right.
And
right.
that's the distinction here.
And then, I mean, the other end of it, too, is if you're covered somewhere else, it's not even touching EWTN at that point. How would they even know? Because nobody's asking us to cover the bill or anything like that. So, I mean, there's options there. It's not like, and this points really to, Lynn, I like your question, too, because it really highlights one of the, since when, now we all know that you need a job to pay rent, you need a job to make income, you need a job to make ends meet. But since when, what the government is saying is you have to get health insurance from your employer. Or why else would they make their employer provide these things?
Right.
There's an argument to be said whether these things are good, and there's an argument to be said whether they're just to be there. But I want to get down to that point. This is now something the government is telling everybody is income. Instead of, they tried to make exchanges, but they didn't really do a good job at that. If they really wanted that.
And what they did make didn't work.
I mean, well, let me put it this way. They want you to pay your taxes, too. You know anybody that doesn't get all the attention they need when they owe money to the IRS? So if it was really that important to the government to make options for health care, wouldn't there be something better out there than there is? At the end of the day, this is really about making us do it.
Yeah, because they don't seem to have the mechanisms to actually provide a service they say is absolutely necessary for women.
Yes.
You know, that brings up a question that, when, again, perusing that decision yesterday, I noticed through the first many pages, I thought it was sort of awesome in the bad sense of that. Why was this decision recounting all of the medical scientific arguments for contraception and the necessity of this for women? I guess in answer to the question, the statement of the church that it's not really health care. I suppose it would do the same thing with euthanasia to explain why that is health care and not murder. But it seemed a disproportionate amount of effort in the decision was given to that. And I wondered, for what end? For what purpose, do you think?
Okay. Now, as a lawyer, when I look at that, it makes me think, wait, what are EWTN's claims? Right in the beginning of our first complaint, we said, we believe these things are not health care. So, if that's our religious belief, you're starting to see the problem with what Justice Joe Flatt, the dissenter, said was with the majority. Mm-hmm. They substituted their morality for ours. Why else would 40 pages of that opinion, of the court's opinion, like you said, go on and on and on and on about how women need this and women need that and women need... She's either telling us that we don't care for women, so the court is telling us that we don't do things correctly for women. That's an interesting statement. I don't know what the real... Or they're trying to convince us that our statement's wrong. And then the big stick at the end of it came, well, you're not getting your mandate, you're not getting your exemption anyway.
Well, and I noticed what I thought was the other anomaly is after doing all of this and responding to the principal argument of our principal argument, they would normally say the decision said things like, well, the dissent said this, you can read it at this point, and the response to the dissent was, we disagree.
Yeah.
Not argumentation, not why it's legally wrong, but we disagree.
Yes. Because
that's a statement of belief, not of legal argumentation.
I'm glad it's apparent to somebody besides a lawyer, because lawyers can go back and say, no, you didn't read that law right because it says this as well. Or they can get into like you said, argumentation. But you're right. They spent 40 pages telling us that women need this. In other words, you guys don't understand science. You don't understand how things really exist. We've heard this argument for Paul VI talked about this argument. We've heard this argument going back for a century and longer than that. But it's the temptation of modern man to spill all these words, like you said, to try to convince us that they're right. And then the problem is the court has a big stick to hit you with. That's what was swung with the 2-1 vote. This isn't that important to you. See, women need this. You should be okay with it. Just put your form in. It's not that big a deal.
Right. Yeah. Just a little compromise. Just a little one. Well, then next year we'll have another little bit bigger and then a little bit bigger one, and pretty soon.
Well, let me tell you something that's a little more sinister. We all know how insurance companies work. Insurance companies work by making money. And one of the ways they make money is by denying you service. What are we going to do when the entire country, all the health insurance says that abortifacients and voluntary sterilizations are equal healthcare alternatives to giving birth?
Right.
The insurance company's going to tell you, you need to get sterilized because we're not paying for another baby. Those days are coming, and it's right there in front of our face. This thing's going to turn sinister. I mean, this is the polite end of the dictatorship, where they at least give us the 40 pages of words.
And we know that organs of government, both national and international, can make these arguments because we're seeing it being rolled out with the Zika virus.
Oh, yes.
Which has very flimsy scientific support for the connection between that and the microencephaly of babies in Brazil. There are other probable causal elements that are completely not being addressed. And yet the argument is, the first argument basically was, we need birth control and abortion, which means the Catholic Church has to get out of the way and has to change its teaching.
Yes.
This is where all these things are leading.
Well, and it's even interesting, too, because some of the science reports, it's strange because, everybody said, this is the cause of the microencephaly. They show us this picture of the microencephaly child. That scares everybody into thinking, this is being caused by this virus. We don't even know that. So what they've already done is sprinkle the fear into everybody that if we don't stop this now sexually transmitted virus, everybody's children are going to look like this. Right. But we don't know that. That's what's even more interesting.
Contrary evidence, like the president of Colombia noted that, something like a third or a half of the women in Colombia have the virus in their blood. They have no microencephaly babies. Why? If that connection is strong, you'd be seeing it across Latin America where this mosquito is present, where the virus is present, where women have it in their blood, but yet that is not the case.
Exactly.
It's in Brazil, and thankfully there are people investigating what actually might be the causes of it.
The best we could say is something's different there from the other places.
And that needs to be discerned and discovered.
Next up is Susan right here in the great state of Alabama, listening to EWTN Radio on FM 88.7. Susan, what's your question today?
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'd like to propose that people go online and they look at Liberty Health Share. This is not insurance. It is a health share. So you're in a membership with other members. It does suffice for folks who are concerned about becoming penalized on their IRS tax form. The Affordable Care Act does consider this, insurance equivalent. So I have chosen for myself the Cadillac plan. It's so affordable. It's $500 deductible a year, and with many more inclusions than exclusions on health care. Let's just say, for instance, an operation, or I'm in need of cancer services. Because I have chosen the Cadillac plan, I am 100% taken care of. All share members will share in the cost. So there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people in the United States, and it's portable to other states. I currently reside in Alabama, but if I go back to my native home area of Massachusetts, it's okay. There's not a network.
Right. Talk about health sharing plans in general.
Well, it's really a good point to bring up, because this is one of the points that I was bringing up earlier. there are options beyond your employer to have things happen. Now, EWTN has assembled what I think is an excellent health plan. As long as the government, it doesn't make us add these things that everybody finds objectionable. But there are, and there have been, and I hope that the health shares stay around. For now, there's still an option that the government hasn't. But when you start to look at the regulations, I mean, do we need to remind everybody how many pages the bill for Obamacare itself was? And then you start adding in all of the regulations from HHS and the IRS on top of it. We're not talking about simple laws. I'm amazed that the co-ops can exist and are out there, but that's the point I made earlier. Why does it have to be us to give the contraceptions when there's other options? If somebody needs that so bad or the government thinks that they need to give it, there's other ways to do it out there. The least restrictive means isn't forcing EWTN to give it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it goes back to a point that was made at the time of the discussion, and the bishops made it, whether you agree with their practical opinion on it or not. You know, in the end, really, if you're going to do a government-run medicine, single payer is the way to go, and not this way, which slices and dices the private sector and places all of this burden on the private sector and on individuals. I don't personally believe that giving everything into the hands of the government is necessarily the best choice, but it makes certainly a lot more sense than what we have. And I think long term, a lot of this is geared at making that happen, because they couldn't even get it through the Democrats in Congress, and I think ultimately they would like to see single payer government funded health care.
I hate to sound like a cynic, but I've seen so many other things taken with the stroke of a pen from the executive branch that it really would have only taken one sheet of paper from the executive branch and one of these executive orders that are happening to so many other things, and all it had to say is one thing: effective immediately, Medicare is available to everyone, period. Signed, President Obama. That would have gotten rid of the age 65, that would have gotten rid of the disability part, and it would have been something that people paid into at a low rate, and Medicare already takes care of affordability. There's the Medicaid on the other side.
Right.
And it would have been that fast if the real concern was we don't want anybody in the country to go bankrupt over health costs. That was the answer. You know why? Because it was what we used to call a critical care or major medical plan. It would prevent anybody from having costs they couldn't afford. That's all that needed to happen. And actually, you know what's nice about it? Our legislators could have read it before they voted on it.
They would have been one page. You know, now you have the situation of young, healthy people jumping on and off insurance plans as they get sick and have some particular issue, which basically just gives, the rest of the time everybody else is paying for the availability of that health care. So they're not really helping fund it at all. They're just taking advantage of it. So, I mean, there's so many logical holes in the way this was set up. It's unbelievable that intelligent people voted for this. Well, I'm making some assumptions there, of course.
Well, it's pretty obvious. We both need to go to more yoga classes and meditate more.
That might do it.
Next stop for us is Charleston, South Carolina. That's where David's listening on AM 730. David, what's your question today?
Gentlemen, thank you for your very good discussion. One point, there was an earlier caller that was asking, would we have to abandon our participation in Catholic health care? And it's important, and I'd love to hear y'all elaborate on this. It's very, very important that surrender is not an option, for the simple reason that Catholic health care isn't just another way to get health care. It's actually a ministry. And in the absence of Catholic health care, where is there going to be an option that is informed by reason and morality other than the government, state religion?
I mean, David, that's a great point, because the church actually invented healthcare systems. There were people who were trained in medicine. The rabbis very often during the Middle Ages were doctors. Others took that up as a ministry, even going back to the Greeks took it up. But really the church institutionalized it in hospitals and facilities during the time of the plague and other crises where nobody else wanted to do that work except the religious, except the clergy. And so it's nothing we can abandon, and we do have to resist because it's part of our precepts of giving material comfort and care to humanity, whether they're Catholic or not. This is what we must do. And John, sort of back to the legal business, this seems to be part of a broader distinction is being pushed upon us that free exercise of religion is the going to church and praying with your fellows. It's not teaching, health care, orphanages, and so on and so forth, because that's what is part of the Christian life.
Yes.
And even this distinction, well, it's okay, you can get an exemption if you're only serving Catholics, but if you're serving others, now you're no longer exempt. Well, the church has always served others. It's always been part of the Catholic moral universe to do that.
You couldn't hit in a better place, because it's certainly true. You see it right in the exemption in Obamacare. You see, it's okay to be religious if you're at church. All the rest of you need to fall in line. In other words, EWTN's not even religious enough for what they expect. We have to do what they say religion is. You see it, and it makes you wonder, if they're willing to do it here, when are they going to do it to the other aspects of our life as well?
Well, they will.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you set the legal foundation of how to do it and get away with it without simply removing that aspect of the First Amendment from the Bill of Rights, I mean, that could be done, couldn't it?
Sure.
You have a large enough majority in this country, you could modify the Bill of Rights. You get it through the legislature, through the Congress, and if ratified by the states. So that could be done. But if you can't do that, then you have to sort of legally maneuver and contain it in a direction that you want it to go. And they're doing it.
And one of the biggest, the saddest parts, and this is where the surrender, the don't surrender. That's why I appreciate David's point so well. We can't surrender. And one of the reasons we can't is you look around us and look at the way that they keep changing and incrementally changing society's ideas. Look at where we even have judges. We come, now the standard, I know it from law school, I knew it from before law school. The standard question from the bench of a person that objects on religious grounds is, does that person have a sincere belief? Nobody can be confused about EWTN's sincere belief that this is wrong. But 40 pages of that opinion,
yeah.
a third of that opinion, another third was the dissent. A third of that opinion is dedicated, half of her opinion, the majority opinion, is dedicated to telling us, swallow your moral conscience, it's not that bad. That's exactly what you're talking about.
It's an unbelievable logic that is being imposed here.
We head now to the Republic of Texas, where Andrew's listening on Guadalupe Radio Network. Andrew, what's your question?
Well, not really a question. It's more of a statement. Totally agree with y'all on part of, I don't think the federal government should make EWTN, provide contraceptives if that's against their belief. But I will say that, I think it should be part of the federal government to, come in if that's what they want, kind of like Medicaid or Medicare, and offer it. But I don't think they should enforce it on a religious, especially a Catholic or whatever the religion might be, to enforce that, especially if it's so against Catholicism. But I think they should make it where Medicaid for all, Medicare for all, and then they have their choice of getting it like that.
Yeah. Well, I would agree that's within their power to do. I wouldn't agree that they should do it. But, and at least with taxation, it's always been the moral principle in Catholic moral theology that's remote cooperation. It goes into, we know government spends money on wars and different things that we don't agree with. But we're only remotely connected to those activities, whereas this involves the citizen directly in these activities. So, yes, if they're going to do it, as John has said, they have ways to do it.
Yes.
Why are they imposing it on us? This would certainly be better to do it through taxation and government programs than the way they're doing it. Not that we would want them to do it at all.
Well, it almost gets the sense that it's important to them to make us use our hand to do it. Make us their agent to do it. Why? And like he's saying, it can happen in so many other places. You can get, well, they don't do paper forms for the IRS anymore, but you used to be able to get them at the post office. They put the wanted posters at the post office. It used to be everything that the government wanted to do that they felt was important, you could get at a post office. Why? They're all over the place. They're all over the country. They're everywhere. If this was so important, why couldn't you go to get it at the post office?
You get it online. Who can't go down to the... You don't have a computer, you go down to the public library and you ask somebody to print the form out for you.
Yeah. I mean, so why do they need our hand to do it?
We'll stay in the state of Texas. Sissy is listening to EWTN Radio on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Sissy, you're on with John Manos and Colin Donovan.
Hello?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. As an alternative, could EWTN change their employees to contract workers and still make insurance optional? Because from what I understand, if your employees are contract workers, you no longer fall under the HHS mandate. Because since EWTN is 100% donor supported, this means when I make a donation, I'm being forced to pay for these services that go against my religious beliefs. So it's not just EWTN.
That's right.
That they are infringing upon, but also upon every donator's religious beliefs.
That's right. And this is the fallacy that the government, Colin and I talked about it earlier. This is the fallacy of the government's reason. The government is only going to allow people to be religious if they say they're a church. The rest of the week, when you're not in that church, you got to step to it and do what they say. It doesn't matter if you think God thinks it's wrong.
Yeah, and if you listen carefully to the language used with regard to religious liberty by this government, by the State Department, by others, by certain candidates for public office, it very often has that narrow distinction of religious worship is to be protected, because they're setting up a paradigm which allows the government to intrude in the consciences of its citizens.
Yes.
You know, and it's interesting, we really don't have time to go to Michael, but he makes a good point. He says contraception will essentially eliminate possible future taxpayers.
Do you know what? That argument's been made. It's been out there, Mike. It's a great point. I can't. Steve, the Population Research Institute has brought that. Yeah, Moser. They brought that point up for decades now. Yes, killing your own kids kills your own future. It should be right there, even for the state. Why would they want to kill their own income?
What's the state interest in this?
Exactly.
No, there isn't any.
Well, I'd like to thank Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego for joining us here on Friday's edition of Open Line. It's actually Colin Donovan. Thank you so much, John Manos. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us. On behalf of Colin and John and our producer, Elena Rodriguez, call screener Matt Kubensky, I'm Jack Williams, thanking you once again for taking some time out of your Friday to join us. We'll be back at it again on Monday, talking scriptural apologetics with John Martinoni. Until we get together then, God bless.